Welcome to the Sheets on Top podcast. This is a place where we talk to inspiring women and share their stories. Hi, I'm Jessica.
And I'm Tracy, and we are your hosts. What does it mean to be a woman in today's world? What does success look like? What does it feel like? Is there one definition?
We talk to women entrepreneurs and change makers about their ups and downs, their triumphs and failures, and how they define success.
We believe every woman has a unique value and a story worth telling, and it's our great joy to share these stories with you.
Today, we are thrilled to be chatting with Ann Shin. Ann is a writer, a documentary filmmaker, and an award-winning poet. And we are very proud to say a new member of She's on Top.
I've been a fan of Ann's for some time. I am in awe of her documentary filmmaking. She seems to be fearless. Her documentary on North Korea meant going undercover at great risk to her safety. Her many films have won multiple awards, including being nominated for an Emmy and shortlisted for an Oscar.
She recently had her first novel published. The Last Exile was released on April 9th, and it's a fictional story that was inspired by her experience making her documentary in North Korea. We're intrigued and excited to learn more about that.
And in case she wasn't busy enough, she also has a brand new documentary, which was the opening film for the 2021 Toronto Hot Docs Film Festival. It's called Artificial Immortality. What does that mean? Well, stay tuned and you'll find out.
It is our great honor to bring you our conversation with filmmaker, poet, author, entrepreneur, and businesswoman, the multi-talented Ann Shin.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Oh, we are thrilled, and I am personally so excited to speak to you. I love documentaries, and I'm just, I love your work. So why don't we start? Can you just tell us a little bit about your background, and did you always want to be a filmmaker?
No, in university, I thought I'd be a writer. And I thought, well, what am I going to do to make a living? And I thought, well, journalism, I guess. And so I started out as an intern at CBC. I was on a radio music, the classical morning music show, as well as I interned at Metro Morning. So I got all my journalistic chops through my years at CBC working as a current affairs producer. And I started doing radio docs. And I really enjoyed them because they're a longer form story. And then as I won a few awards with the radio docs, and I thought I'd like to do this for my life. And so I found a way to get into doing film documentaries because it's a little bit more money. It's paying yourself a little bit better. But yeah.
And you have your own production company, right? Fathom Film Group, that is all women. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It's led by women mainly. I worked through at CBC and various independent production companies, and like a lot of young people coming up through the ranks, you put in your time and you learn, at the bigger organizations. And when I realized, I don't want to produce as much as, produce segments, or I don't want to produce that as much as I want to kind of direct long form docs. I thought, okay, I'll start up a company with a doc that got off the ground. The Defector Escape from North Korea, actually, that was the documentary that started up Fathom Film Group. And early on in the company came Hannah Donegan, who is the head of production at Fathom now. And we're a generation apart. She's a millennial, and I'm in my early 50s. I'm 52, and I'm so glad.
Yay for women in their 50s! Yay!
She keeps me kind of, somewhat current, or I'm not current, but at least she keeps us current. And then there's a bunch of great women. Nicole McKechnie is a line producer. Erica Lendertz is a great creative producer. Mandy Kane is our kind of production manager. And people like Laura Bombier, and there's a bunch of other collaborators who are part of the whole group of us.
That's amazing.
Cool.
I mean, working with all women, Jess and I work together and we love it, but working with all women is, totally, it's great. It's exciting. And do you notice that there's certain challenges that are unique to being a woman in the film industry, even unique to having a production company that's all women?
I think that when I was coming up through the journalistic ranks, what you have to do is pitch stories and hopefully if you pitch successfully, you can get your story produced and you get to produce it. And if you're not so successful at it, you get assigned a bum story. And so I was trying to pitch my stories, and I found that, this is one of the things I noticed, there being a gender difference in the workplace, how I was pitching as compared to how my male counterparts were pitching. I would, suggest there's an idea, this great story I want to do, but I'd prevaricate and qualify and say, well, there are these, contradictory whatever, I'm looking into this. And I would always try to be transparent about all the doubts I had about the actual idea, which was very, it's counterproductive when you're pitching, but I just felt like I wanted to present all the nuances. It's a rich story. Whereas I found, some of my male counterparts would be like, this is the story. We have to do it. It should be on at 6:00 tonight. And everyone's like, you're right. You're right. Let's do it. And so I remember as a young producer, I noticed this and I thought, okay, I have to start pitching like that. So I kind of took it on as an attitude. I would fake it. The expression, fake it like you make it.
Yeah.
I fake it till you make it.
Yes.
And I did a lot of that in my 20s into my early 30s. And then I found that just as a woman and as a person, I began to feel my own confidence kind of in my body and in my mind, and where I could present ideas with authority, that I didn't have to consciously think about how to present it with authority, but that I just felt my own authority and could present it. And so that was, I think, a product of me just maturing. And if I was a different person, I would have just felt that in my early 20s. But I think, like a lot of women, it took me a while for me to come into my own that way. And that was very satisfying to feel. So that's something that was, a gender difference I noticed in journalism in my experience.
I love that. And I think it's a great point for a couple of reasons, because there's so much information in society or whatever it is about, women getting older and losing their power. And to me, that's the truth about, we find it ourselves, that you gain this confidence and you become more seated in yourself, which is actually fantastic as you get older, because it creates more opportunities. And I think you're braver sometimes too, in a different way, know? Yeah. And it also, I love it too, because, we want to talk about this a bit more later on as well, but we want to get into the specifics of the films you made, but we also want to talk about the fact that people don't realize that making films is a business, that it's like, you have to pitch. Is somebody going to like that pitch, and I've been through the process myself, and it can be a heartbreaking process, because it's not always about, the best idea. It's about who pitches it the best. And so that was amazing. But we wanted to talk first of all, though, because you've created so many amazing films, and we wanted to talk specifically about the documentary, The Defector Escape. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because you had to be brave to do that. I mean, you had to go undercover. Where did that come from?
It's be careful. It's kind of like a be careful what you choose to, dig into, because, you're halfway in and it's like, oh, wow, am I really doing this? But you've stepped yourself into it step by step. And that's what happened with me. I found myself running undercover with North Korean defectors in China. They were illegal. They had no status and were afraid of getting caught by officials. And that was part of my journey as a filmmaker, following North Koreans defecting from their country. And it started just because I learned that there were a lot of North Koreans in Toronto at the time. They were refugee claimants. And I began to meet them and seek them out. I'm of Korean background myself. My parents immigrated to Canada during Trudeau's, Pierre Elliott Trudeau's prime ministership. And he had an open door policy where he was welcoming immigrants. And my two parents came from Korea at the time. So I was born in Canada, but I've heard lots of stories about Korea, post-Korean War, where both North and South were in a similar state. And, there was a lot of poverty and not much sense of hope at the time. And so those memories that my parents had are kind of deeply embedded in my psyche and my body. But I've born and raised in Canada, in Langley, BC. And so there's a sense of dislocation between my heritage and my own sense of my personal history. And so when I learned about the North Korean defectors in town, I just wanted to meet them and hear more about their journey. And I began to understand that there was this underground network of people across the world, like an underground railroad, helping North Koreans escape from their country. And I was so fascinated, and I thought, okay, here's a story of, an individual's radical escape for freedom that I just find so compelling. I wanted to follow it and show the journey and share it with Canadians, because so many North Koreans were arriving at our doorstep, and we didn't really know their full backstory.
That must have been, incredible going undercover. I've watched parts of the film. It looks incredible. And from that film, that documentary, you've now, written your novel, correct? And
yes,
it came out, isn't it a love story? Can you tell us a little bit about this novel?
Yeah. The novel's called The Last Exiles, and it's out with HarperCollins. And I've written poetry, a couple books of poetry before, but this is my first novel. And it's based on all the years of research and time I spent with North Korean defectors, and how their story and their bravery, that has inspired me to try and tell it in a fictional form, because the lessons they've learned can be distilled in fictional form and just made in a much more pointed way. So it's the story of Jin, who is a fellow from the countryside. There's a lot of rural areas in North Korea where people are really still living in the same conditions they were living in back in the 1950s. And so he comes from that area. And then there's Suja, his love interest, who is a young woman from the upper class in Pyongyang. And there is a rising middle class in North Korea. They go to ski resorts, they have cell phones on geo-block networks. And they meet and fall in love. And by a turn of events, they end up having to escape. They lose one another. And it's about how they try to find one another while living undercover in China. And it's an extreme journey to freedom. And hopefully it just, inspires everyone to see the universal message that is inherent in the book in a time like this, where there's so many totalitarian governments, or the rise of, cult of personality leaders. I think, the importance of safeguarding individual rights and freedoms is something I hope everyone will see as a message that speaks to them in this novel.
I love that. It's so smart, because people might think, why wouldn't she just write something, not more of a biography? But I actually think it's kind of fantastic, because I think it's easier sometimes for people to take in information in a fiction. It will reach more people. But I'm curious, because writing a book is very different than making a film. And I know for myself, I tend to, having a background in television, if I was ever going to write anything, I think in terms of screenplays. So how was it taking off the filmmaker hat and putting on the writer hat? Was it intimidating? How did you do that?
It wasn't intimidating, because I've been writing since I was a kid. So I'm largely introverted, but partly extroverted as well. And so I can't, I don't feel right in my bones if I'm not hunched over a piece of paper or my laptop typing, writing something out, a piece of fiction or a poem. So that came naturally to me, writing the book. But it's interesting, as, a woman in my middle age with a business that I've started up, and where I'm responsible for keeping a number of people employed, and I'm happy to be working with them. It's a great group of women, and the synergy is wonderful. So balancing the work requirements, the work obligations, and then my own desire to finish this book was an interesting challenge. It's a balancing of one type of creative love with another And so that's why the book took 8 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't
Wow.
realize it took 8 years. That's amazing.
That's cool. What I was going to ask you is that you're so busy. You're talking about balance, right? So I know you're a mother. You have 2 daughters. You're writing on your novel. And now you've also got a new documentary, which is going to be opening Hot Docs this year at the end of April. And it's on artificial immortality. I've watched the trailer. It looks totally fascinating. Can you just tell our audience a little bit about artificial immortality and why you wanted to make this film? It's such a different subject to the other subjects you've been focusing on.
I'm a Luddite at heart. If if it were practical to have a typewriter, I would work with that. But I have a love-hate relationship with technology. I'm fascinated by it, but then it also intimidates me, and I'm very concerned about all the resources that are going into technology and AI technology and where it's leading to. I feel like we're running headlong without actually seeing our destination, and I'm concerned we're going to create a crash. So that was part of my initial interest in just exploring AI technology, where it's at today. But then my father, who is elderly, has started developing dementia, and it's been really sad to see him lose whole chunks of his memory. Like, it's not just, oh, I forgot this person's face and name. It's like he can't remember his wife, the woman who he sat by her hospital bedside till her final breath. He can't remember her properly. Like he'll see a picture of her and he'll be like, who is that? And so I was really, I think a number of us, particularly in our age, are going through this, where our parents are getting elderly or they're losing their memory. And I thought, what is it that makes a person who they are? Like, my father was the storyteller. I got the storytelling bug from him. And he has lost all his story, a lot of his stories. I'm losing him in bits and pieces. And I thought, what is it that makes you you? What is the essence that makes a human who they are? If you lose your memories, are you still you? These are some of the philosophical questions I had in my mind as I was researching AI. And then I realized, particularly in this past year of COVID, so much of our lives are playing out digitally. Like, we're so used to this digital interface, and there are also digital avatars and clones and other ways in which scientists and technologists think we can transfer parts of ourselves, and transhumanists will think that we can actually transfer our consciousness to AI. So that's what this film's about. Can we actually do that? Some people say we will very shortly. And there are, I talked to Deepak Chopra and other people. Deepak Chopra has a clone of himself called Digital Deepak, who smiles at you, watches you, and you can ask a question, and he'll respond empathetically and say, do you want me to help you walk through a meditation about this? And then he'll do that. And this is an app. It's an avatar of himself. And there are a number of people who have these avatars. I end up having one created just to see how my children react to it as well. And you'll have to see the film, find out more about what's coming down the pipe for all of us.
Are you a woman entrepreneur looking to grow your business?
Would you benefit from being connected with a highly engaged group of women entrepreneurs invested in your success?
Then we'd love you to join our community.
Here you can collaborate, network, cross-promote, and feel supported, whether it's a free expert workshop or one of our fun events like our monthly hikes.
You can find all the details on membership in the notes, or you can go to our website at she'sontop.com. God, I didn't know it's so fascinating, because for me, it brings up so many questions, which is, yes, we're capable. Is it something that you want to do? And also defining what our consciousness is. Is our consciousness one thing? It's like when it sort of says it keeps your consciousness alive. Is it just, the personality that you have developed as this person, but what is, like, there's so many discussions just around what our actual consciousness is,
Yeah.
And
thousands of years. It's occupied people for thousands of years.
Yeah. And I know, but I also understand the desire. I lost my father 5 years ago, but he was, a writer and an author and a storyteller. And I'm so grateful that I have his novels and I have recordings of interviews of him because, so there's so many things around it. So I will be there. Lined up with my
me too. I was gonna say I've watched the trailer. It's so fascinating. I can't wait to see the docs. I'm very excited for it.
Oh, great, thanks.
Can you talk about the process of film? Because you've made amazing films, and they're such fantastic subjects. But what is the process of filmmaking? From you can have an idea, but somebody just doesn't hand you the money, right? So how do you balance? Do you have several ideas, and you have to figure out which is the most commercially viable, or you're like, I don't care which is the most commercially viable. This is my passion, and I'm going to go down this road. How do you balance the your business, the business part of your brain is Ann Shin versus the creative, I want to tell the story part of Ann Shin?
It's interesting. I think that there are some projects, I think that particularly with filmmaking in this way, any project that you take on, if I feel my own personal passion for it, then it'll do well. But if I don't feel it in my bones, no matter how I put all my intellect towards it, it's not going to sing. So that's an interesting thing in just recognizing that it is an art form still, that even if it's geared towards the industry. But that being said, there is at Fathom, we have a whole process. We have a developmental arm, we have a production arm and a post-production arm. And ideally they're all happening at the same time. So part of me is thinking about what next, or the great thing about being journalists, as you both know, is just being alive to what's happening in the world. And that's the development side of filmmaking, being alive to what's happening and noticing trends, or just what you're feeling. What do you find that you're drawn to? And that part of development is one, it takes that impulse, that initial personal impulse, and tries to shape it into something that other people can relate to. So in our development process, we think, okay, how is this going to speak to other people too? And then the secondary part of that process is also which broadcasters or platforms would want this kind of film. So then we'll come up with 20 ideas, and maybe, 2 or 3 are the ones that we end up kind of developing more with ideas that are all hit the mark. We're passionate about it. We think it'll speak to other people. We have a certain audience in mind. And 3, there's a platform that we know or we think will want it. And that's where we'll put our time into in developing it. And then we'll pitch it. And then that, pitching can take anywhere from 2 to 4 months. And then if we get some interest, it can take another 4 to 8 months to line up all the financing, because for filmmaking, particularly in Canada, you can get a license fee from a platform, a broadcaster, and then that would provide a fraction of the budget. And then you have to build the rest of the budget with other funding, including tax credits. And that to apply for those funds takes time. And then once the financing is lined up, then we go into production. Of course, during that time, we'll have kind of gone out with our own sweat equity to film things that are happening that we think we just have to catch. And we'll do a lot of the writing and the sizzle making and all that in that time period.
Yeah. It's quite a process. I don't think people realize what goes into making a documentary. Maybe more so with a film, but not, but not a doc itself. Now, you've garnered some success. So do you find it easier now to get backing and financing because you have that success? And so, yes or no, but also if you're a young filmmaker just starting out, how difficult is it, especially in Canada, to get some financing when you're creating a doc?
Right. As a young filmmaker, it may be hard to get your voice heard, but there is a strong kind of culture of fostering new voices, because particularly in documentary, we're always looking for new, fresh stories and new, fresh points of view. I think the thing that helps young filmmakers the best is if they're able to really be connected to themselves and to find a story that they feel passionate about, that they have unique access to. That is, that is the best way for them to get noticed and to get supported on a story. And I think what I just said there, I said in a matter of 10 seconds, but it's actually a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing to be connected to yourself and feeling strong about who you are, like from the heart, and then finding a story that you think that can communicate with others, that you are very passionate about, that you have independent access, like you have unique access to. So it's stated very easily, but in actual fact, it's difficult. I remember going to the National Film Board with my first couple film pitches, and I wanted to do 2. And I spoke with Louise Lohr, who was the director of NFB at the time. And she gave me great advice. And at the time I thought, I'm not sure about this, but I heeded to it anyway. And it's helped me a long way. And she was saying, do the story that's closest to your heart, right? That's closest to you. And I had pitched 2 stories. There was one about a community of dog fight, there was a dogfight ring in Scarborough, and there were guys who were financing their sports cars and their lives and their gold necklaces because of their boxers and their dogs that they were fighting. And I thought, wow, this was so fascinating to me because it was so foreign to me. And then the other story idea I had was, 2 of my cousins have had their eyelids operated on, so that I'm of Korean background. My cousins were as well, so that it just creates a deeper eye fold. So some Koreans have an eye fold that's that looks more Caucasian, and other Koreans like myself, I don't have that kind of deeper fold. So there's a cosmetic procedure that will create that look in the eye. So for me, I pitched that as the second story, and Louise was like, "You go with that one," and I was like, right, you're telling me to do the Asian story because I'm Asian, right? And in a nutshell, yes, she was.
Right.
But the deeper answer was, I had incredible access to that story. Like, I lived it, I know it. And so much so that I just didn't think it was a newsworthy story, right? But she saw the newsworthiness of it. And so that was great advice from her.
By any means, you have been a successful storyteller because, you've done it in multiple genres. You're recognized as a poet, a filmmaker, an author. Do you consider yourself successful? Do you see yourself as successful?
That's funny. I mean, I think I take it project by project. And so at the end of the book, I considered how did it express what I hope it expressed? Is it the best that it could be? And I feel that way about films too. I think about, we spend, days and days and weeks just honing and polishing and honing, and we could just keep going. And even with a book, you can keep going because as you're changing, you want to change the book, or I find that's how I am. But at some point you just feel like, okay, I think that's, the best it could be. And then of course, once it's out in the world, you can see it again. And you're like, oh, I could have done this. I could have done that. So I'm never 100% satisfied, but I wonder, I guess I think about whether the project successfully communicates to someone else what inspired me to do it, what moved me, about the story and why I wanted to share it. If it connects with someone else in that same way, I feel like that's successful. But the whole question of success is really an interesting one. What are we actually chasing here? What do you think is success? What is success? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we grapple, Jessica and I grapple with that question. And all the women that we interview, we ask them that question, and they're from all walks of life. And some of them are hugely successful. And even they struggle with the image of what is success. Some of them have been on the cover of entrepreneurial magazines as Woman of the Year, and they still don't feel like a success, or they've realized it's not what they want to do. So we definitely struggle with that question. It's hard to come up with a definition of success. Wouldn't you agree, Jess?
Yeah, it's actually kind of become a little bit of a mission of the platform, because originally our business plan was, we're going to go talk to these female entrepreneurs and get, here's the 6 steps to being successful. And then we talked to them and they talked about, getting to what they thought was success, and it didn't feel right. They talked about being lonely. They talked about, I became successful in this, and I realized I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something else. And so, we kind of hope through talking to women like you and all these women of different backgrounds to maybe open up the idea of what success is, because society can say it's one thing, but, maybe that's why we always ask about it is, do you feel successful? Because maybe it's a feeling, not a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it is a feeling. I mean, I think if you can be authentically who you are and express that in the world, whether that means running a company of 100 people or whether that means writing a poem, if you can do that and you're happy and, I think you're successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Do you have any advice for young women who want to start in the film business? I know you gave some tips before, but any other words of wisdom?
I've heard this said by other creatives as well, but I will say it, and I'll try to qualify it so it's not so vague, but it's go with your gut and go strongly. Go with it. Meaning when you have a gut instinct about something you really want to do or something that you're passionate about or a story that moves you, go with it, stay with it. And don't let your head get in the way. Don't let doubts or theories about this or, don't let that get in the way. If you just focus on that passion, that will help you be strong and determined about getting it done rather than, letting different ideas about how it should be done or doubts about how it should be done, that kind of thing, blocking you. So that would be my one word of advice.
I love that. And is there a woman that inspired you or even more than one that you've looked that's helped you as you've sort of worked your way along?
It's interesting. I'd say Margaret Atwood inspired me because she, even though her literature is not my favorite kind of literature, I really admired how she was writing about letters, writing about Canada's place in the world, as well as just writing, her own stories. So I liked how she not only carved a place for herself in the world of letters, but carved a place for Canada. And in doing that, she created a bigger presence, a bigger shadow, around her, of who she is. And so that she inspired me. There's, I haven't thought about this. Can I take a moment to think and you can edit it?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
I actually wanted to say, I love the Margaret, what you're thinking about. I love the Margaret Atwood example anyways, because look how old she is now. Handmaid's Tale is just exploding.
Yeah. Yes,
so
exactly.
It's you can have so many, you just don't know. She's a perfect example because she just wrote what she liked, and then it's echoing decades later,
I like your point, Jessica, too. Now more than ever, we can be who we want to be at any age. I had my grandmother, when she was in her mid-50s, she had, she was widowed. Mm-hmm. She had just seen herself as a grandma, and had that life for her. But we can embark on a second career or a third career or fourth career in our 50s. And, there is that place in society for us to do that. So I'm really, really, I feel like we're fortunate to be living in these times. There are problems like global warming and, the rise of totalitarianism to deal with, but in other ways, it's great to be living now as well.
This was fantastic talking to you. We really, really enjoyed it. I personally cannot wait to see your documentary and to read your book. We're very excited, and we'll put all the notes in the show notes. We'll put links to everything so the audience can find it too. And just thank you so much for talking with us today. We feel very honored that you became a guest on our podcast.
I really enjoyed it.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. You're a real inspiration, and I know you'll have inspired a lot of women today. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. And I'll keep listening to She's on Top.
Yay. Thanks,
Ann.
All the
other inspirational.
Yeah. Cheers. If you enjoyed this podcast, we'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to rate it and write a quick review, because that helps us get found. And of course, we'd love it if you subscribe.
To learn more about us and our amazing community, go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. And you can also follow us on Instagram at she's_on_top.
Thanks for listening.